What up? T-Bob here.
And Jake as well.
And look at you. You done stumbled upon little OTB Saints, where we bring you all the latest black and gold coverage.
Who are the Saints going to draft? Who's going to be their quarterback? What does the salary cap look like? All that information and more.
Hope you enjoy it. Like, subscribe.
After you talk about a story that has been making the rounds recently. So my guy Ramon Vargas, who I used to back when I was first starting here in New Orleans, he was writing for, I believe, the Times-Picayune, and he's a very good journalist. He would go on to be an investigative reporter for The Guardian, and he's been working on this story for a while, looking at the Saints' involvement in covering up, softening the blow of part of the Catholic Church's, the local chapter of the Catholic Church's sex scandals, in which we all know at this point. I mean, the movie Spotlight won Best Picture for a reason, because the Catholic Church had a lot of sexual abuse of minors going on and was covering it up and was shuttling guys around to different spots, trying to kind of make their past be hidden and allowing them to continue to work. Now, the allegations against the New Orleans Saints, and of course, look, if you know the Saints' history, Gayle Benson is a very devout Catholic, as are many in the city, and she has a very close relationship with the Archdiocese here in New Orleans. And when the Archdiocese and everybody else was getting in trouble here in, it seems, okay, I think as the story pertains to the Saints, I think it is twofold, Jake. First, when everything was going down, the New Orleans Saints and Greg Benson, their head of communications, got very involved in crisis communications, like coordination, right? Like helping out the Archdiocese and the church and everything. How do you respond to these stories? Applying pressure on media to paint them in a positive light, things like that. Maybe the most damning allegation in this story is that the Saints went so far as to remove names, because when the church gets caught, the Archdiocese says, look, this is awful, and Greg Benson tells him, look, I think the best strategy here is to be open and honest and put out a list, all this other stuff, like a list of people who more than likely engaged in this behavior. Well, the Saints are now, it's being alleged that they got the list ahead of time and that they specifically asked for some names to be removed from the list. We have actual records of that communication taking place, but everybody involved is saying, I don't remember that happening, right? That did not happen. Here's my read on all of this. It is disgusting, but unsurprising. It is the movie Spotlight, right? You see a ton of powerful people who all have vested interest in the church and want to paint the church in the best light despite these awful and horrific crimes. And I think it's gross that the Saints were so forward in trying to paint this in the best light and help out the church with crisis communications and apply a lot of public pressure to newspapers and news outlets to have the people involved, you better write a positive story. It's a lot of you better write a positive, but at the same time, crisis communications, so that is the job, and that's what Benson does. It's a bit like a defense attorney. A defense attorney is a job, and you're going to defend awful people, and you're going to defend awful crimes, but it is your job. In that same way, that's kind of what being a crisis communications guy is. And so now I think some criticism is definitely warranted because Benson went out of his way to get involved here. He wasn't paid for it. But it's I think that's really bad. And then obviously removing names is awful, but it just all seems too dense. And the allegations maybe not bombshell enough, I think, for any major ramifications to come from this.
I hadn't followed this story as close, and I'm kind of catching up, and I know it was a story before, and now it's kind of coming back right now, and I don't know it as much and trying to play catch up, like I said, but the question I would have is why in the world, why are the Saints even getting involved in something
because
like
the
this?
boss.
I know, but it's just
because Miss Benson.
But I can't fathom what like any scenario to play out to think this was going to be something positive. Like, it's just like, why are you getting involved in this? This is, I know that you are a religious person. I know Catholicism is your religion of choice, and I know it means a lot to you, but this is not something that you need to be involved in.
Yeah, but like you said, I mean, when you're a member of the church and it is such a core piece of who you are, and to be fair, you probably really believe in your local father, right? Like, if he's not on that list, you believe he did not do anything wrong. Maybe you even believe that he had no hand in covering everything up. If you really believe that, you're going to want to help him navigate this situation. And I believe Miss Benson probably believed that when it came to the Archdiocese and wanted to help him get make it through this, paint the church in a more positive light. That's again, I just keep going back to Spotlight because it's the exact same thing, where the most interesting part about all of this is everybody who is supposed to be enforcing punishment here or going after them are also, for the most part, members of the churches who have a vested interest in wanting the church to kind of keep their nose as clean as possible and make it look like a few bad actors and not as widespread of a problem. I mean, the district attorneys who are supposed to be prosecuting the case are members of the Catholic Church. So, here's my deal. In the end of the day, it's gross, it's awful, but nothing's going to come of it because it's a bit too dense. The allegations are not bombshell enough. And there's just way too many varied, powerful interests at play. There's people at every single step along the way, again, who have vested interests in keeping, and looking out for the church that they are a part of. And I'm not saying, like, they're all evil.
Does the NFL step in?
No, the NFL said that Roger Goodell was asked about it at the press conference yesterday, and he said that he believes that the Saints were not involved in anything more than just like an advisory role. So no, I don't believe so.
That's wild. I mean, the NFL will turn over 73 stones to make sure you didn't have a face mask in a game that didn't get called a penalty in the game, but they're going to find you for that. And then it just feels like they're kind of like, they're going to handle it.
But you know the difference there.
Protect the shield, I know.
Well, one is a player and one is one of the owners.
I know.
Like the owners, whatever the owners say goes. The owners are the bosses. Roger Goodell is nothing but a mouthpiece for the owners, a lightning rod for the owners, and the owners are literally the most powerful people on the entire planet. So, of course, like, no, they're not going to try to cannibalize one of their own. Is there behind-the-scenes pressure saying, what the hell are y'all doing? Why did y'all do this? Is there behind-the-scenes pressure to sell? I don't know any of that. Like, surely, but I don't think you'll ever get anything public to cry. Unless you had, again, you need something more digestibly damning.
Yeah.
Because you got to read to really understand this. You got to read, for like a 30-minute article essentially, and really dive into a lot of different names being thrown at you, a lot of different allegations, a lot of different kind of dry email reading. But yeah, I'm with you, Jake. The Saints just never should have involved themselves with this in the first place. The Catholic Church made their bed. They needed to lie in it. And if you were going to help them with crisis communications and you were going to get involved, you had to understand that these repercussions, which there may not be many at the end of the day, probably just ignore it and it goes away. But you had to know that this was going to come to light and that you were going to at least suffer a reputational hit, if nothing else.
Yeah, I guess I'm just surprised by Goodell's answer and maybe not, making sure they do their due diligence. But you're right. Unfortunately, the 32 owners, anytime Roger Goodell would come speak to us as a team, we would have questions. We would have concerns. He basically was like, I'm not going to answer that because one of the 32 owners doesn't agree with you. Like, during the lockout, it was awful. Like, why'd you waste your time and our time to come here because you're only going to give in to the owners? You don't care about the players. And not that this is a player issue. I'm just saying, like, he is going to look out for 32 owners, and that's all he cares about.
Danny Bass says, why would you advise something as disgusting as this? And then Leonardo says, T-Bob, any effort to minimize this and protect the image of rapists is evil? Shame on you. Guys, I don't disagree. I had no hand in minimizing the Catholic Church. If anything, I've gotten heat for making Catholic Church jokes about it because people get very offended. If you're asking why, the why is not hard to understand. The church means everything to Miss Benson. Miss Benson has billions of dollars. She's very close to her diocese. She wants to make sure that their reputation of the church and the individual as a whole is as protected as possible. Like, that's not, again, I don't think those are hard dots to connect. Joey LeBlanc says, why does a priest go to a football team? This is also a thing that goes back throughout history, right? Go look at when Rome pulls out of Britain back in the day, and so civilization kind of falls. You have barbarians suddenly in charge. Well, who steps in and allies himself with those powerful interests? The church. And that's they become the educators. That's one of the reasons why they kind of rose to power in the way that they did. Like, the church aligning themselves with powerful interests is something that is a tale as old as time. So yeah, it's really gross. It's really gross. You're sitting here applying pressure to journalists and newspapers to paint things in a positive light when you're talking about covering up decades of sexual abuse. And knowing that there are abusers and moving them around, hiding their backgrounds, obfuscating, staying out of legal trouble, paying hush money, it's all gross. It's all gross. It's just my PR read on it that there's not going to be any major, that there's just not going to be anything major that comes of it. I mean, hell, the crazy thing I read, I didn't realize this, Jesuit High School was out there paying settlements silently for years and years. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. But that's the story, and that's how the Saints are involved. I don't know, I don't know, I don't know what else to say on it, except I don't support it. I think obviously
and nothing seems like it's going to come.
No.
Of it either, which is kind of wild.
No. Which, who knows? The Saints ownership as a whole is in a weird spot right now, a very odd spot. Long term, what happens? Of course, Dennis Lash is the executor of the Benson estate. There are plans to give everything away. What happens to the franchises? Who knows?
Wow, just amazing black and gold takes right there, Jake.
I don't think I've ever heard any takes that are better than the two guys that just gave you that take.
And you can keep getting them by going ahead and liking, subscribing, ringing the bell to get notifications when we post. Have a great day. We'll see you on the next OTB Saints.